This story took place in the year 2004 when I was a 14-year-old girl still living in my home country of Uruguay. My best friend at the time, same age as me, was my neighbor who lived with her mother and grandmother 3 houses down from mine. We had been friends since we were babies. We grew up together, went to the same school, moved in the same social circle, went on vacation together, shared clothes, CDs, food. We were basically sisters. Our families were close. Her mom, early 30s at the time, was a single mom working as a secretary. They didn't have it bad. Between her salary and the grandmother's pension, they lived comfortably and without any major setbacks. Her mom started seeing a foreign guy who was in the country for business. He claimed to be from Spain, but he had a funny accent, as if he was originally from Italy or another non-Spanish speaking country. He was supposedly rich, despite staying in a rinky-dink hotel. He would often show pictures of himself in a very luxurious residence. He said it was his house in Ibiza. Pictures of him driving a red sports car, a picture of him in front of the Eiffel Tower, and so on. After a month and a half or so of dating, my friend's mom said they were leaving the country in perhaps the next 6 to 7 months. She was in love with him, and he had promised her a life of luxury in Europe, and everything was going to be perfect. The country they were moving to was Spain, her and her daughter. The grandma couldn't come, at least not yet. She was supposed to meet them in the future after they had settled in. But at the same time, wasn't he rich? This is where I come in, since I was such good friends with Maritza. The guy had told Maritza's mom to bring me along for vacation, that it would be good for Maritza, make the transition easier. I was, of course, thrilled. A month in Europe with my best friend who was moving away, and the idea of going to see her every summer and stay at her stepfather's mansion, it was a dream. My parents, of course, weren't so thrilled at first, but as they got to know him, they liked him, and eventually he won them over too. Eventually I even got a little weekend job as a waitress at my uncle's restaurant to help my parents with the plane ticket and other costs. We got my passport, and we were ready to go. As the months went by, it became evident that I wasn't going to be able to go. The money I had saved wasn't enough. It didn't even cover half the ticket, and my parents couldn't come up with the rest of the money. A week or so before they left, the guy came to my house and talked to my parents. He offered to pay for the plane ticket. My parents politely declined. I was fuming. I swore I would never talk to my parents again. I didn't come out of my room for days. Eventually, I got over it, and when it was time to go to the airport to say goodbye to them, I did. We cried, we hugged. We promised each other we would meet up next summer. By then, I would have saved the money. They left. We never heard from them again. The days went by, and nothing. I remember the grandmother, the pain on her face. The nights she went on without sleeping, home alone without her daughter and granddaughter, who were supposed to call her as soon as they arrived in Spain. And yet they never did. Eventually, they were reported as missing. Surprisingly enough, the guy had given out his real name and last name the whole time. After the cops got involved, it turns out he had this huge record in Spain and Italy, and he had been in jail for drugs, prostitution, kidnapping, extortion, and so forth and so on. The police told their family that they were most likely sold into a human trafficking ring, that this was very common, and that sadly, there were too many cases like it. There was nothing to do but wait. Last time anyone saw them or had any register of them was at the airport in Seville when they arrived. Nothing else. It breaks my heart even to this day, and to think that if my parents had said yes, I wouldn't be here today. It sends chills down my spine. Sometimes I search for Maritza's name in social media in hopes that I'll find her. Maybe she regained back her life and her freedom, but nothing ever shows up. The grandmother died in 2013 too. sadly without ever seeing or hearing about her daughter and granddaughter ever again. This all happened within the last month. I have a sister-in-law who is a heroin junkie. She started on pills but switched to heroin as it is cheaper and easier to procure. I always knew she was a selfish, rotten human being, but I had no idea how sick she really was until this. It started 3 weeks ago when I stopped by my mother-in-law's house with my 4-year-old son. He loves his gammy, and we had a few minutes for a visit. When we arrived, she was on the phone with her daughter and excitedly announced that little Jimmy was there to see her. She didn't mention myself being there and continued chatting for a bit. About half an hour later, I was in the bathroom when I heard my sister-in-law show up. 2 minutes later, I go into the kitchen where he was supposed to be with his grandmother. No sign of him. I ask her where is he, and she tells me that her daughter had taken him out front to play. Noticing his shoes under the kitchen table, I snatched them up and stomped outside, annoyed that she didn't bother putting them on him before going outside. I step out the door and see her boosting my little boy into a pickup truck, a man I don't recognize behind the wheel, obviously one of her drug buddies. I sprint across the lawn, grab her, and push her out of my way so I can scoop up my child and pull him out of the truck. Sister-in-law immediately starts whining that they are just taking him for ice cream, and why do I have to be such a bitch? I inform her that my son is going nowhere without her even asking, with one of her junkie friends in a vehicle with no car seat. She calls me a few choice names and takes off with her friend. I am given grief by my mother-in-law and husband for being mean to her while she's in such a fragile state. 2 weeks later, my husband gets a frantic call from his mother that the sister-in-law is in jail again, and she has no money for bail. My husband does what he always does and heads off to bail her out. However, he finds out that her bail is way beyond anything we can afford, and over the next couple of days finds out what she has done. She and her junkie friend borrowed the young daughter of an old friend to take out for ice cream. But instead of going to the local Dairy Queen, they took her to a crummy motel and left her with a man in exchange for several $100s. As they are going back to the truck to go score with their newfound wealth, they are surrounded by cops with guns drawn. Turns out, the guy in the motel room was an undercover officer, originally trying to bust heroin dealers selling out of a seedy bar that my sister-in-law frequented. I do not know how she came to offer him children in exchange for money, but the officer let her do it and set her up. Now she is exactly where she deserves to be, and I hope the judge sentencing her shows no mercy. This happened to one of my best friends a few months ago. Usually after work, she gets to the train station and drives home, but since there have been so many human trafficking stories in the news, she calls me as soon as she gets off the train, and we don't hang up till she's safely in the car. She kind of leaves her phone in her pocket or hand and doesn't talk, but it's reassuring for her to have me there with her. This particular night, my friend calls earlier than usual, and I greet her happily as I'm clicking away in my video game. And then she suddenly says, "Mom, we need to buy some milk. I need it for the birthday cake." "Yeah, we need to get it from the one near the city. It's his favorite." The problem with this sentence is, number 1, my friend can't bake for shit, and number 2, she's lactose intolerant. Anyway, so I realized something was obviously wrong, and I asked our flatmates to come to the station with me and tell them that we need to go pick her up. When we arrive, I ring her up and she says, "Yeah, Mom, I know. We might have to get the guys to set it up on the platform. I went to their office this morning. Yeah, it'll be safe for the kids to play on." So my friends and I make our way to the main office, and our friend power walks with us out of there, and she doesn't speak until we're well and truly away from the station. I make sure to take a bunch of unnecessary turns, and we cruise around the city for a long time to make sure we're not being followed. She said that there were a few guys on the train that were making her uneasy. About 3 or 4 guys were sitting in the back of the car and talking. They were describing my friend in exact detail, right down to what color nail polish she had on, what station she usually got off at, what her car looked like, etc. Her plan was to act like she was staying on till her stop, but leave right before the door closed on the stop before it. They were speaking German, and not very quietly either. My friend grew up speaking 5 languages, one of them German. She didn't take trains for a good 3 months following that incident. Not that I blame her. It's a bit dark, but sometimes we do theorize what they were planning on doing. I believe it might have been a human trafficking ring or something similar. Our friends think gang rape, and my friend thinks a combination of both. I've always felt a bit silly making my friends invent coded sentences with me, or calling them on the way home because I like scaring myself silly. I honestly never thought it would come in handy. If you or someone you know is a victim of human trafficking and needs help, you may reach the National Human Trafficking Resource Center at 1-888-373-7888, or you can text HELP to the number 233-733. If English is not your first language, or you are not comfortable communicating in English, that's okay. The collective staff that is available is capable of speaking over 200 languages. Human trafficking exists in every country. It's important to always be aware of your surroundings and what's going on around you in case there may be danger lurking. A large percentage of people who are abducted into human trafficking die within 7 to 9 years. What's even scarier than that fact is this one. A large portion of those abducted are age 11 to 18. Always pay attention to your instincts and listen to them. They might just save your life.